Our apologies for being late down here this evening, especially with this beautiful performance that you now introduce.
Thank you, Mrs. Sloan. This evening we have our fifth graders from Daly Elementary School, and we have some students from the chorus, the band, and the orchestra. Their chorus teacher, Dr. Ruth Adio, Mr. Aaron Prinzel, the band teacher, and Ms. Carly Valentine, the orchestra teacher, will be here to lead them. The other thing I do want to point out, we have a beautiful art exhibit in the hallway, and Lisa Keefe, our teacher, was instrumental in setting that up from Daly, so we're very happy to showcase Daly Elementary School this evening.
all the parents for coming out on such a cold night, and even bringing the kids in concert attire. We appreciate that very much. We also thank the board for the opportunity for FaceTime with the children that we all serve. We hope that you keep us in mind as you make the challenging decisions.
I just wanted to thank the children again for that beautiful performance. I had the pleasure of hearing them at their winter concert as well, and it sounds more beautiful every time. So thank you very much.
Mrs. Callahan, would you like to call the roll?
Certainly. Mrs. Sloan. Here. Mr. Hohauser. Here. Mr. Baer. Here. Mr. Greenstein. Here. Mrs. Johnson. Here. Mr. McDermott. Here. Mr. Ryan. Here. Thank you.
I'll make a motion for the adoption of the agenda for, thank you, Mr. Baer. All in favor? 7-0, thank you. Before we move to community comments, I just have to say, in case it's not enough for any members of the board to volunteer the countless hours of time and energy towards this position, it's just above and beyond the call of duty to have to be here on the evening of your birthday. So, Mr. McDermott, we'd like to wish you a very happy birthday.
Happy birthday to me. I just want to say there's very few places I'd rather be than with all of you guys on my birthday. And my wife came, she's in the audience, so she's great. Hey, honey.
Okay, well, with that, you need to know nothing more about Mr. McDermott. Do we have any community comments this evening? We will be keeping to the 3-minute limit and would ask that you would identify yourself for the record.
Hello. Okay. Judy Epstein. I am a parent. And looking in the agenda items for tonight, I read ahead a little bit and saw a proposal to increase class size, which is something I've been wanting to talk about anyway. Since going to what I still call back to school night, I guess it's open house night. And I go around and it's hard to tell because more than one person shows up per child, but a lot of my son's classes, he's a sophomore this year at Schreiber, looked really big. And I was right. For example, although tonight you're proposing to increase by 2 to 30, the limit for what it's worth, he was already in a class of 30 students for integrated math honors. So when the standard or the guideline was supposed to be 28, it's at 30. And in Chem Honors, when it was supposed to be 28, it's 29. And that, I believe, is after the people who are going to leave have probably left. And in chemistry, it's especially a matter of concern. I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but I'm not sure there are stations for that many children. So in addition to it being a matter of safety, I'm not worried, but I think about it. I trust the school district, but I also want you to keep in mind the same things I do, navigating around a crowded room, and also the equity if not everybody gets to do the experiment when it's being discussed by the teacher. So the reason I bring this up, I believe it is district policy that if you want to go smaller than guidelines for a class, or if permission needs to be granted by the board. But when the district wants to go bigger, it's not required. Might be a good idea, you might do it anyway. My understanding is it's not required. The net effect of that, whether you intend it or not, is that we in the audience who come faithfully always hear about the classes that are too small, quote unquote. We don't always hear a faithful representation of how large all the other ones are. And I would like that to be in the forefront of people's minds. These classes are not, in my opinion, small enough. And I feel as a parent that it makes a difference. So, thank you.
Is there anyone else this evening for community comment? Yes.
Good evening. Christine Vasilev, Port Washington Teachers Association. I'd like to follow up with what the previous speaker spoke of. Our current policy, while it does call for 2 students less than the proposed policy, certainly allows for the board under any given circumstance to increase that. My concern is this. I know of no new information or new research that has challenged in any meaningful way the reasons for the current policy, the reasons for the policy that exists, that being class sizes with limits of 18 for pre-K, primary grades K2, 21, intermediate grades 3 through 5, 24, middle school 26, and high school 28. Those numbers were arrived at thoughtfully and in consideration that good pedagogy requires realistic limits. If the decision that the board is considering is purely based on economic decisions, I would urge the board to reconsider that. The fact is that in the past, as of necessity, the board has needed to waive the current policy, but the understanding was that this was in the best educational interests of the students of Port Washington. That hasn't changed, and I would hope that the board would seriously consider maintaining the position if the thought is, and I'm sure that some cynical among us might say, oh, the teachers just don't want larger classes. Well, no, we don't. We don't want larger classes when that will affect instruction. Can we teach a larger class? Absolutely. Can we teach larger classes the same way? No. Certain things have to give when you make those decisions. So if the decision is to be made purely based on economics, I would hope that that would be reconsidered in thought of what is best educationally. Thank you.
Tessa Jordan. I certainly do feel that the new class size guidelines are too big. And I think so many times now the present guidelines are exceeded, and including making class guidelines twice, two more, those will again be exceeded. And I hope that those numbers are reconsidered. However, what I wanted to speak about briefly was the other policy on directory information. There were two aspects of the new part which concern me. First of all, it talks about electronic and/or digital communication. I'm not sure that that's exactly what you mean. To me, communication means the actual letters or communications which go back and forth between the district and the parent or and the student. And I'm sure that you're not meaning to say that that information becomes public information. What you're talking about is simply the email address as opposed to the communication which is carried on via email. So I think there the wording needs to be changed if indeed that's not what you intend. The other aspect is the last bit, which says that it includes but is not limited to email addresses. I think that leaves open a wide area of other information. I don't even know what not limited to, included but not limited to, what it allows in. If I were a parent, I would know whether or not I wanted my or my child's email address to become part of the directory. But what else am I allowing there? I don't know. And the rest of the directory information is very specific. I would suggest in this last part that you say including email addresses, include anything else that should be included, and then if there are other things which come up in the future that you feel should be part of the directory information, add that information at a future date.
Are there any other community comments at this time? Okay, we will close out community comments. And I would just like to say that tonight we will have further discussion on the budget. And as we can see from our community comments, it begins the public debate about any proposed discussion about cuts, and class size is part of that. Any discussion we have, any cuts we make, it will impact the students, but the times are what they are, and the financial realities are something we all have to face. And we welcome your input, and we hope that we will get through this to an end decision of the budget number together as a community with something that you can all support. So thank you for coming out and speaking to us, and we hope that you will continue to, and to email us your thoughts. And now I will turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you, Mrs. Sloan. I do have just a few items to update on. I just want to make people aware that we are streaming live, so I'm hoping that people do understand that, especially those making community comments. Just a brief security update. I did want to update the board that we have, since our last meeting, we have been investigating a few different software programs that scan licenses and can produce a photo ID for a visitor badge. There's a couple of different technologies out there, one called LobbyGuard, ScholarChip, A+, Interlogic. So we're looking at a variety of those products just to see, if there's something we might want to pursue. The Emergency Preparedness Committee and the District Safety Committees are both meeting by the end of the month, so hopefully we'll have some more clear recommendations for the board shortly thereafter. Finally, in regard to security, there was a recent stated requirement that the district safety plan be posted on the website. That is posted on our website. However, even this memo indicates that building plans are to remain secure and they should not be posted on district websites. So that information does remain confidential. Just an update on the APPR. The district administrators have completed their training on the Danielson 2007 rubric, and following tonight's Board of Ed approval of principals and directors as teacher lead evaluators, we are getting ready to begin the observation process in accordance with our approved plan. Assistant principals, curriculum associates, and other instructional administrators have completed training that allows them to conduct observations but not complete end-year evaluations. So there is a difference in designation for Board of Ed approval. The Teachers Association has been incredibly cooperative with us, as we begin this process, and we are working together to get that started so that we're in compliance and we complete the inordinate amount of observations that must be completed before the end of the school year. Just a brief curriculum update. Again, working collaboratively with the teachers, we continue to make some really nice progress through PGCD with regard to first of all, the math curriculum subcommittee. That the members have been appointed. And typically, I wouldn't give this type of additional information, but I do want the board to know that that committee is scheduled a meeting for January 31st, so it's great that they are moving along. The PEP subcommittee is also reconvening, and we have an elementary middle school assessment subcommittee, which I spoke about at the last meeting, and those committee members have been appointed as well. So there's, some really significant work that is occurring through PGCD, and this is a relatively short time frame, and we're just looking, of course, to implement the Common Core and APPR, and from the administrative end, we're certainly dedicated to providing the resources necessary to support these initiatives. And then just finally, as Mrs. Sloan mentioned, we have a budget presentation tonight just to really give a bit of a historical context for moving forward. And I'll repeat it again, February 5th is our first official budget presentation. I'll turn it over to Ms. Fennick for the enrollment report.
The enrollment has been stable for the past 2 weeks at 5,289.
Thank you. The only thing that I would add is that we have begun our kindergarten registration. Again, this is something that we watch very closely, in particular as we develop the budget as well. Our total projection for this year is 376, which is less than the 400 that was projected for last year. Last year we exceeded the 400. We were close to 430. I'm hopeful this year that this projection at a lower number will hold for us. It would be very helpful, again, in our budget process, but that does remain to be seen, and the registration is ongoing, so we'll have greater updates for the board as we move forward. I'll just let our student representative, Kyle, give his update.
Thank you, Dr. Mooney. To all fifth grade parents, there is a Weber orientation meeting at Weber Auditorium this Thursday from 7 to 9. Coming up this Friday, the 25th, is PYA night. Girls varsity basketball team is versing MacArthur at 7 p.m. in the Schreiber main gym. There will be raffles and face painting. On Saturday, January 26th, the boys wrestling team will be hosting the Bob Busby wrestling tournament at Schreiber in the main gym at 9 a.m. February 1st is boys varsity basketball. They are doing a coaches versus cancer to bring awareness to the American Cancer Society at 7 p.m. on February 1st at Schreiber. On February 5th, the boys and girls are doing a game for Max Cure to ask the community to bring an old pair of sneakers. More info will be on the website. All teams are doing well. There are 4 big events that we ask the Schreiber community to attend. And Schreiber students are studying for their midterms and regents this week, which will end Friday. And the Schreiber students would like to thank Student Council for passing out candy this Friday for midterms, promoting a sweet midterms week. Thank you.
I'll make a motion for the approval of minutes for January 8th, 2013. Do I have a second? Mr. Hauser, all in favor? 7-0, thank you. And we'll now go to the discussion item to Ms. Callahan. There's a PowerPoint, right?
Yes. Yes, there is a PowerPoint presentation, and Mrs. Callahan is going to provide us with an overview.
Thank you, Dr. Mooney. I actually don't expect this presentation to be terribly long because we are working very diligently trying to establish some numbers for the board and the community to consider for the purpose of discussion. So this evening, my intent is simply to provide a little historic information. As you would expect, our budgets have gone up. In 2005-06, that was our year of contingency, and the following 2 years, we actually were successful in trying to make up for some of the loss of that contingency by passing budgets in the 5% range, from 4.75 to 5.4, and then to 4.95. But for the last 4 years, we have averaged a budget increase of 2.32%. And yes, that is probably far more in line with what the cost of living has been over the last 4 years, but unfortunately the district's expenses don't always positively correlate with the cost of living. And so that creates difficulty for us in trying to maintain a program and provide for a levy that the community can support. The purpose of showing you specific budget lines is not to pit one area of the budget against another. It is simply to show how, due to circumstance, different years require different funding. And actually, in the 2006-07 year, while you see a figure of about $14.5 million, that was a year in which the board had to amend the budget and add almost another $1 million to it because we had a surge of new entrants to the district, and costs from everything from consultants to placements did exceed expectations. The following year, the board was very generous in providing an almost $400,000 increase over and above what had been the actual expenditure, and that resulted therefore in 08-09 not being too high an increase in that particular line. And the subsequent years seem to relate to the aging out of specific students who may have been high-cost students. And in all instances under 12-13, what you will see is the originally budgeted amount because the year is not yet over. The next line, which is computer-aided hardware, you will see that we have not been as consistent in an uptick and maintaining that particular infrastructure due to a variety of needs. Again, certainly in 05-06, we were not allowed to purchase any equipment, and that's why that figure is flat. But over the subsequent years, as we tried to replace existing equipment, those are the years that have our peaks. But the valleys are the years where we have simply purchased new software. We have not or have added to some of the components, such as the servers, but we have not been able to move too far forward. And I think that in developing the 13-14 budget, you will see that there is, based on pressures coming from the state and the need to improve our infrastructure, that you will see where we will have another peak in that particular area. Athletic costs come and go based on the costs for salaries, based on the costs for transportation, the number of students who are involved. Over the years, we have had more and more student athletes, and we're proud of that. And we have been able to maintain that budget to some degree because of the fact that the units cost for coaches and assistant coaches has not changed since 2008-2009. Staff members are still being paid the same, as we call it, unit pay. Each sport is valued at a certain number of units. Transportation, again, you will see that last year in 11-12, we were able to enjoy some savings. Dr. Gordon did express the idea and encouraged us to really try to rethink our transportation and fill our buses to their capacity. We were able to save the cost of 7 buses, which was almost $500,000. But other than that, having had the same vendor for a number of years, we are fortunate that the only increase that has been foisted upon us is that of the CPI, which is published in June. It's the May CPI, and transportation contractors cannot get an increase greater than the number that's published by the State Education Department. Our transfer to capital line. Interestingly enough, you will see in 05-06, when we were in a contingency year, that was the year we spent the most amount of money, and that is because it was an emergency. We replaced the entire roof at the Manor Haven School, which was just under $1 million. In 07-08, 08-09, we had no expenditures in that line. We had growing enrollment, and our dollars went for staffing instead. And in 11-12 and 12-13, we have had minimal dollars put in that code, $265,000, which is a paucity when you consider the size of the infrastructure here. And again, this is an area where we need electrical upgrades, we need fire alarm system upgrades, and we will be bringing to the board for their consideration an increase in that line. These are salaries. We are a human resource rich enterprise, and there is not much that we can do relative to our salary increases, except at the time when we negotiate with any of our bargaining units. It's really not something that we can deal with at the time of a budget. And a lot of our salary costs are related to our increased enrollment. As our enrollment grows, differing from many of our surrounding communities, such as Herricks and Great Neck and Roslyn, that are all experiencing major reductions in staffing, we continue to have a very healthy enrollment in our schools. And this is the cost of benefits. That includes health insurance, it includes Social Security, workers' compensation, life insurance for those who are not members of the Teachers Benefit Trust Fund, and we have little control over what is charged to us by the Empire Plan. Again, the contribution by all employee groups is something that we look at the time when we negotiate with those groups. This is the balance of the budget. As you can see, we came to a peak in 2010-11, and now those costs are lessening because some of the other costs that I have just shown you continue to grow, and as they grow, we need to find places to cut within the budget. This is a 10-year comparison of enrollment. You can see that we've had over a 7% increase in our overall population. At the same time, our increase in special education students has almost doubled the regular enrollment. In the years where we had an increase of 10 or 15 students, that is something that the general budget could manage. You will see that there are some years, however, when we would have 25 or 30 students come in district, and that wreaks havoc with the district budget. And those are unanticipated expenses because we simply can't know, other than from the preschools, if we have some children who are coming in who may have special needs. Staff reductions over a 5-year period. I must say to you, however, that while I am confident that the overall numbers are accurate, I would have to say the administration and the non-aligned numbers might be slightly skewed, because the building level administrators total 22, and the administrators in the central office are 4. I believe these numbers count the transportation director, the director of facilities, the treasurer. They are all civil service employees and technically should be considered in the non-aligned group rather than the administration. And so that changes some of those numbers. But overall, in both of those lines, there have been reductions over the 5-year period. You can see clearly that the greatest reduction has been in the clerical within the district, in the building at the building level and at the central office. Custodians, even though our number remains constant, it's constant in a different way. As we would have retirements, we would hire, rather than a custodian, we would hire a cleaner, therefore saving in money, perhaps not in bodies, but in monies, after negotiating with the bargaining units. And you have heard in previous budget discussions reductions of paraprofessionals. That did in fact happen. Each of those years we told you we were going to reduce paraprofessionals. The issue, however, is that as new students come into the district who require teaching assistance for a special program, we wind up having to hire. And so over time, with reduction of staff and new students coming in, we find ourselves 5 years later with a constant number. But overall, we have had some reduction in staff, so we are trying to make those reductions each year, carefully looking at each of the groups, and we will continue to do that for the 13-14 budget. This, please note, this source is Newsday, because as I look at this more clearly, I do not understand the third column, cost per pupil. As I understand it, what Newsday did was take the district's foundation aid, a portion, which is a portion of state aid, and divided that among the students. Why they call it a cost per student, I'm not quite sure, but I think it's more of an allocation per student. And this does give you a look at the number of administrators that we do have. Again, that number should be 26, not 25 for Port Washington administrators. But if you look down the list, you will see that there are 26 administrators in Roslyn for 3,300 students, and there are 24 administrators in North Shore for 2,850 students. So if we were to put a ratio up there, I think that other than for East Williston, well, maybe not even East Williston because their enrollment is so small, that our ratio would be hard to beat relative to our enrollment. Now, as I said, this is just an overview, and when we have our first scheduled budget discussion on the 5th of February, we will have some information for you in more detail, but to do a quick review of the tax levy limit formula. While you may have heard that the number is 2%, 2% is the number that has been promulgated for this year as one of the components of a much larger formula. One of the items in that formula is pilots. Pilots are monies that are received from the county when they make agreements with corporations to reduce their taxes to entice these businesses to either stay in the town of Port Washington or encourage them to come to the town of Port Washington. The formula tells us to add in the anticipated pilots for next year. Well, we get that from Nassau County, and we have contacted them 5 times now, and somehow they have not been able to generate that number yet. So hopefully by the 5th, I will have more information on that. If I do not, I will be using the current information that we have for 2012-13 so that we can at least get a sense of where we are going. The next item in the formula calls for exclusions, and that simply means that there are items that you can add over and above to the tax levy, still be within the levy limit formula, and one of those is the retirement system costs, if it's any greater than 2% from the prior year. Well, TRS has given us a range of 15.5% to 16.5% of employee salaries. They are not going to publish the exact percentage until sometime in February. We know that it is greater than a 2% from last year. Last year was 11.84. So anything greater than 13.84 is a dollar amount that will be considered an exclusion and will be allowable over and above the tax levy limit and still allow the district to be within the formula. So we did find out that the growth factor is 2%, and then another item that's part of this formula is the capital levy, and that has to do with our debt service, our anticipated expenses, less certain state aid information, which again has not yet been published by the state of New York. So we have pieces of that capital levy, but we don't have everything. What have we done so far? We have met with all of the bargaining unit leadership. We have talked to them about the levy. We have talked to them about the pension increases and the major negative impact that has on the overall cap limit. We are continually updating the levy limit formula as the components become available so that we can get this information to the Board of Education and then get some direction from the board as to whether piercing that cap limit is something that we want to do or think the community will bear in light of any cuts that may be proposed at the February 5th meeting. We have met with the district administrative team multiple times because our goal, our primary goal as administrators, is to present to the Board of Education whatever cuts that must be made that we are all willing to live with. Obviously, there are no cuts that we want to see in staff or programming, but based on a formula that is going to cause us to reduce our anticipated expenditures by more than $4.5 million is going to require some very difficult and thoughtful discussion and agreement. So we are refining the tax levy limit numbers, looking forward to getting our state aid information, looking forward to finding out exactly what the teachers' retirement system is going to tell us the number will be, because the difference between what I have tentatively budgeted and what could be the high end of the number is another $500,000, which could change our shortfall from $4.5 million to $5 million. So I don't mean to be cavalier about hundreds of thousands of dollars, but the numbers right now are not clear enough to begin to give people facts to consider. We certainly hope to be able to do that, however, by February 5th.
Thank you, Mrs. Callahan, for that presentation. I look forward to the next meeting, hearing more details. Does anyone have any questions at this time? No? Mr. Bear has a private question. Mr. Bear, do you have any questions or comments? Do you have any questions? You're the only one left.
Oh, I have a quick question. If we assume that the TRS increase is, let's say, 15.5, which you're thinking might be the low end of the targeted range, right, that they're giving us, but let's say it's 15.5, and I can't remember what the increase was last year. The formula for the tax cap levy, you're able to include a portion of the increase in the TRS that's greater than a 2% increase. What does that mean in terms of numbers, in terms of is it a percentage increase above the tax cap? Is it a dollar amount?
It would be both. If we had to go to 16.5% rather than the 15.5%, the dollar difference based on our payroll, because it's not only teachers, it's administrators and teaching assistants who are in the teachers' retirement system, it could be $580,000 more, which is added on to the budget, so it becomes a little bit less than 0.5% more increase in the budget. The tax levy limit formula, however, says anything greater than 13.84% on salaries, because last year it was 11.84 on salaries. Anything greater than 13.84 is part of the budget increase, but the difference between 13.84 and 15.5 or 16.5, if that's the final number, that amount can be added as outside of the cap. So assume we get 2 points outside of the cap. That's worth $1,100,000. If the cap comes out to be 2% with all of these other figures added in, then you're going to be able to add $1.1 million on top of that. So instead of a 2% levy, it would be about 3.1 or 3.2, somewhere in that range. And that is very difficult for, I believe, for the general community to understand, who have not had the time or the ability to get to these meetings or to look at us live streaming, because perhaps doing one slide at one of our meetings that certainly show the exact numbers of the levy limit formula would be enough to help people understand it's not just 2% greater than the levy was last year. Sorry, I gave you the long answer to the short question.
Larry had unearthed earlier today the comment that the governor was considering offering school districts a 12.5% rate. That 12.5% represents the percentage of payroll that we have to contribute to the retirement fund, right? That's what that amount is?
It would be 12.5% of all payroll that's subject to the teacher's retirement system.
So based on that, what we're going through now is the catch-up, as Bill has often said, from the assumed rate to the realistic rate of the market going down and up. If the governor were to flatline that based on the fact that the market has recovered a certain amount, waiting for it to catch up, there could come a point in time where the normalization of that line item goes back down into a 6, 7, 8% range. And if the plan is, and that's why we need to look into this, if the plan is in fact to have school districts sign up for 3 years at 12.5%, and even when it goes down, you're still going to pay 12.5%, but you're neither borrowing nor doing anything other than inserting this line item now into the budget, and you'll maintain it for 3 years, it might be very advantageous for us to do that, because there would be potentially about $1.5 million that we've assumed in the budget that we would get back, because sooner or later, the fact that the market is back or nearing 14,000 has to catch up in some of the rates of return of the pension fund. And so just, not that we have an answer tonight, but it is something that we should really dig through to make sure that we understand, if in fact it exists, Larry, that we pin it down to what benefit it would have, what the time period is, and as you had pointed out, are there borrowing costs because you're now 4% or 3% under, and that same $1.5 million we don't want to have as a future debt unless we're able to erase it by not reducing our contribution if and when it goes down to a smaller percentage of the overall payroll, which in and of itself should happen as our payroll increases to a degree. There should be some percentage there that we pick up anyway.
Right now, in the employees' retirement system, there is an opportunity to amortize. However, there is an interest to that. And I am not sure about the relationship between the governor and the teacher's retirement system, how he can say that this is going to happen. I don't know what his conversations have been with the retirement system either. But we still have time to try to ferret all this information out.
Anything else, anyone? Okay, we thank committee reports, policy and personnel. Ms. Johnson.
I don't talk enough to know how to work my mic yet. We had our Policy and Personnel Committee on Friday, and as was noted in the agenda, we have come up with a proposed revision to the class size policy and that's a +2. We did not have any new pedagogical information. However, really the idea is that this increasing the policy by 2 is not going to de facto increase class sizes at all. Nobody wants to do that. The committee doesn't want to do it. The teachers don't want to do it, parents, the administrators. But this will, A, reflect where we are with some classes already, and B, give autonomy to the discretion and judgment to the administrators and the teachers in cases where this may have to be, and in cases where it's already being done. So it's on for first reading. I don't know if there's comments from any of the... Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'll make the next report a little shorter. We've also talked about the directory policy, and that's on for first reading later tonight. And we are continuing to discuss the social networking policy, and we'll, report on that as developments happen. The committee meetings are posted, minutes of committee meetings are posted, so if anybody's interested, we encourage you to look online. In addition, the next Policy and Personnel Committee is meeting on February 8th at 8:30, so feel free to come if you're available.
Budget and Facilities, Alan?
Thank you. At the meeting we held on January 14th, we had our Clerk of the Works group in to talk about the roof. As we had reported, the documents are up at State Ed. They were submitted back in November, and we're estimating somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 months to get it back. So we are somewhat on plan and on time schedule to have that go out to bid March, April, and then an awarding hopefully sometime in May, so that as soon as school is out, we can start on the roof. As we've discussed a couple times here, we covered again an updated amount for the electronic testing that is coming as of 2014. The administrative group looking at it had determined that we needed somewhere in the neighborhood of $665,000 to be put in, so we are looking at that as a 2-year phase-in inside the budget. Those numbers are there. One of the other discussion items was potentially changing the mileage limits for busing inside the district. We are doing some studies about ways to see if we can reduce the number of buses across the district. Each one, I believe, is at a cost of $60,000. And so whatever we can do to potentially look at that, and if there are any savings, use that money in the overall program. And then there are a number of other items that one will come up under new business. We looked at ensuring that there are enough dollars in the curriculum line item to anticipate some initiatives on that side. And there are also some security items that we continue to look at and are pending information back from the district-wide task force to see what else we need to include in the budget. And the next meeting is January 31st. It's a change from the Mondays. It will be Thursday, the 31st, at 8:30 in the Daily Annex.
Thank you. And now curriculum, Mr. Greenstein, I don't know if you have anything new to report to us now?
Nothing new to report.
Thank you. I will now move to the action items, item A1 through D14. Does anyone want to pull anything? Do I have a second? Mrs. Johnson, all in favor? I asked if there was discussion. Do you have discussion? Oh, okay, we have a brief discussion.
I only wanted to, only because it's on the agenda, and while it's still a long time away, Marlon Villalba has announced his retirement. We're at item D1A. as of the end of this school year, and he's been someone who has done an enormous amount across the school district. And I just wanted to, not that I'm shorting anybody else who's retiring or who's on the list, I just happened to see that I've worked with him a long time in a lot of different ways and wanted to thank him for a huge amount of service to the district.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? 7-0, thank you. I would just like to acknowledge and thank the J.D. Blumenfeld Memorial Scholarship Fund, the Dan Bureau Memorial Scholarship Fund, the Joseph Giordano Memorial Scholarship Fund, Mr. and Mrs. James Giorino, Hearts, and the Schreiber High School HSA, all for their very generous donations to the school district. Thank you. And now we will move to board policy, and I will make a motion for approving the policy for adoption this evening, the Standing Committees Policy 2250.1. Do I have a second? Ms. Johnson, any discussion? All in favor? 7-0, thank you. And Mrs. Johnson, if you want to lead us through any discussion on the policies being put forth for first reading tonight. You started on class size, which I think you opened, and I just wondered before the board commented if Dr. Mooney would like to perhaps say anything about why you suggest this was a policy for review.
I think that Mrs. Johnson did speak to some of the issues in terms of what having the policy reflect what actually has been occurring. It's important to note on the elementary level that our class size average, despite having to exceed the current board policy is still about 22 students per class. So, and we're very cognizant of, being careful with our class sizes. Surrounding districts have similar class sizes to where we seem to have been going the last few years. It's also important to note from the administrative perspective, as you started to say, Mrs. Johnson, that we do consider cohort information and other factors when making determinations whether to divide sections or not. So this is not to lock us in. This is simply to reflect more of what's been happening. And it is true that it is in part from economics. I can't deny that, but it is a reality of what's been happening. In addition, in years past, the board had already agreed without the administration coming back to the Board of Education to increase the class sizes by 1. And what we've had happen again in certain circumstances as it's exceeded to 2. In some cases, unfortunately, it's actually exceeded a little bit higher than that. But in difficult economic times, we have to look at all areas, and we've provided other types of support to those classes to help offset some of the larger class sizes. So I think that, again, those are my comments on it.
I would just like to add to speak to, I believe it was Judy Epstein had made this point before, and it's a valuable one, that we do speak frequently about the class sizes that are under the policy, and that is because by policy we have to approve them, but we really should make more public the very numerous classes that are above that number. So it's something we will try and do. And this isn't something that any of us or any administrators or any teachers or any parents do want to see happen, have class sizes become larger. But Dr. Roy Nelson was on the board for a long time, and he oversaw this committee for a long time, and he taught me the wisdom of doing things properly, and you have policies in place for a reason, and they should reflect your practice. And so it could be a point of pride that we retain the policy as it is at a number that we all believe we will not be able to meet anywhere in the near future for many of our classes, but that's just not the way that it should be done properly. So our hope is that someday soon we'll be back here changing the policy again, and reducing the numbers again, but for the foreseeable future, that does not seem likely. And so I think we have to support Dr. Mooney's recommendation that we have to make a change to this policy. Does anyone else have anything to add? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, class size is always something that we strive to do. We haven't been, we've been letting a lot of larger classes slip through again that the public hasn't known about, so we're sort of catching up. But just in terms of going forward with this new reality, perhaps we can be looking at things, supports and other things we can give to the teachers to help them be able to be as effective as possible with the non-optimal class sizes. Maybe there's way as our technology grows that can help. Certainly by there are more difficult classes and easier classes and class placement that the principals have to make. Who goes into what class is going to become even more important as the class sizes grow. So we have to give them the proper support so that they can do it. And so there are things we can try to do to mitigate the issues that the large class size do over time if we all work together and try to make that happen. And as you said, hopefully in a few years we'll be back here trying to get smaller class sizes again.
Do you have anything to add about the directory information policy?
I'm looking at the language again after the comment by Ms. Jordan, and I'm wondering if perhaps the word communication could be taken out and the word information could be substituted in. Maybe that's more in line with what I was thinking as I read the word communication. We can look at it again. I mean, we don't want it to be so broad that people will rightfully be concerned about what they're agreeing to be published. On the other hand, we want to make it reflect accurately the kind of information that we want.
No, it's not. Oh, hit yours. That one. Maybe let me make a suggestion. Instead of information, maybe I would suggest changing communication to identification. I think that might be more in line with what's anticipated with this particular phrase.
Larry?
Yeah, just briefly, we wanted to have as a district as many ways as possible to contact families. So if that is cell phone or Twitter or Google Plus or Facebook or whatever we need to do, especially if we have to get information out quickly to a lot of people. But so we do need to have that information, but what we have to be clear about is that parents can opt in or out of giving any specific piece of information to the directory. So if they want their email address but not their Twitter account on the directory, and that I guess it's more of an administrative item, that the form be very clear exactly what they're allowing to go in and what they're allowing to go out, and there shouldn't be a if we don't hear from you everything goes in type of process.
Maybe you can just review that in committee one last time, make any changes in the committee discussion.
Yeah, I think we'll discuss that again on February 8th and take all of these good comments and see where we go with it. Thanks.
Okay, do we have any old business this evening? New business?
One of the items that we had thought we would bring forward is the potential formation of a combination community and board committee to look at other sources of revenue that we could come up with for the school district. Bob was really a champion of this idea last year. We never got around to it, and he's got a world of experience in it from some of the outside things he's done. But clearly, as we go forward in a tax cap challenged environment, we need to come up with large amounts of money from other sources other than simply tax receipts. And it's great that we have the Education Foundation who continually contributes in all the HSAs, but the reality is that we need to find a stream of hundreds of thousands of dollars or face the continued erosion of district programs. Some people have raised the ideas of putting advertising around the turf field. There are naming rights. There are a whole bunch of potential ideas. There are graduates of Schreiber who have gone on to do wonderful and prosperous things. There are corporations who will donate equipment and other things, and it needs to be a group of people potentially who are really working on this. Not that they will necessarily come forward, but we have several billionaires who live in the town of Port Washington, and while we may never get a dollar from them, it's not going to hurt to have a group of people try to put together a sustainable program where we court some of that money, because it wouldn't take a lot out of that billions to go a long way inside our 7 buildings here. And so just put that on for consideration, and that over the next month or so or two, maybe we can come up with some ideas and move that forward.
We will move on to the second and last opportunity for the community to be heard. Anyone? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.